The orbital bombardment began without warning. They called it mercy. This cleansing fire. From the spire of the governor's palace, I watched my city, my home, my entire world burn. Every street I ever walked, every face I ever knew, turned to ash and glass. They said it was to purge the taint, but all I saw was annihilation. They burned our world and left nothing behind. In that moment, watching the horizon glow with the death of billions, I made a choice. There was no fighting this, no victory. There was only survival. They called it mercy, but I call it murder. And I will not be another victim. I will run. Will live. And one day, I will remember. The evacuation klaxons blared across the ravaged plains of Cygnus X1. A desperate symphony for a dying world. Ash rained from a sky, choked with orbital debris, each speck a tombstone for a billion hopes. Down on the Ferrocrete landing pads, chaos reigned. Panicked citizens, their faces etched with fear, swarmed the last transport ships, a tide of humanity clawing for a chance to escape the planet's final, shuddering breaths. The Imperial Guard, clad in their imposing carapace armor, struggled to maintain order. Their Lazari Falls held high more as a symbol of authority than a genuine threat against the desperate This was the end of a world, and everyone knew it. Amidst this pandemonium, I moved with a purpose that bordered on sacrilege. My name is Vex, and while they were running from death, I was running towards a different kind of damnation. My target was the Starlight Wanderer, a bulky, civilian freighter, its cargo hold groaning with vital supplies meant for the refugee fleet. A lifeline to the desperate souls on this tarmac, its captain was a savior. To me, he was an obstacle, my gaze locked onto the ship's boarding ramp. A gateway to a future no one else would dare to claim. The air was thick with the stench of ozone and fear, a perfume I had grown far too accustomed to. I bypassed the main crowd, sticking to the shadows cast by towering cargo containers. My movements were a fluid dance of stealth and opportunity, learned in the gutters of a dozen forgotten worlds. An Imperial officer was barking orders, his voice raw and strained. I saw my chance. A discarded power conduit lay nearby, a quick, calculated strike, and a section of the landing pad's lighting grid flickered and died, plunging the area into temporary darkness and confusion. Shouts of alarm echoed, but they were my overture. In that brief moment of engineered chaos, I was a phantom, slipping past the distracted guards and onto the ramp of the Starlight Wanderer. The ship's interior was a stark contrast to the bedlam outside. The low hum of the engines was a calming mantra, the air clean and recycled. Crew members hurried through the corridors, their faces tight with the stress of a last-minute departure. They paid me no mind, mistaking my grim determination for the same desperation that drove everyone else. I was just another shadow, another refugee who had slipped through the net. Little did they know, I wasn't here to be saved. I was here to become the wolf among the sheep. My hand rested on the grip of the plasma pistol hidden beneath my jacket. Its familiar weight, a cold comfort. Finding the bridge was easy. Every ship, no matter how grand or humble, has a heart, and the path to it is always the most direct. The blast door hissed open, and I stepped inside. The captain, a man with a weathered face and kind eyes, looked up from his console, a brief flash of annoyance crossing his features before turning to weary acceptance. He probably thought I was a stowaway, pleading for passage. He opened his mouth to speak, probably to offer some false hope or a stern refusal. He never got the chance. The sharp, menacing click of my pistol's safety being disengaged was the only introduction I needed. His eyes widened, the kindness replaced by a sudden, stark realization. The two bridge officers at their stations froze, their hands hovering over their controls. "Get away from the helm," I commanded, my voice a low growl that cut through the sterile air of the bridge. This ship just changed ownership. There was a tense silence, broken only by the steady thrum of the ship's core. The captain, to his credit, didn't panic. He straightened up, his gaze locking with mine. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice steady. "Stealing a transport during a planetary evacuation, that's not just a crime. It's an act of ultimate damnation. The Imperium will hunt you to the ends of the void. I offered a mirthless smile. Let them come, I replied, gesturing with my pistol. Now, seal the ramp and initiate lift. Your cooperation determines your crew's survival. The captain held my gaze for a long moment. A silent battle of wills fought in the space of a few heartbeats. He saw the cold, unyielding resolve in my eyes, the abyss I had already stared into. He knew I wasn't bluffing. With a heavy sigh, a sound that carried the weight of his broken duty, he turned to his helmsman. Do as he says, he ordered, his voice laced with defeat. Seal the hatches. Prepare for immediate departure. The heavy groan of the main ramp ceiling echoed through the ship, a final, metallic sigh that severed our connection to the dying world below. On the bridge's main view screen, the image of the panicked crowd receded as the Starlight Wanderer began its ascent. The faces of those left behind were a blur of anguish and despair. They were being abandoned, their last hope stolen from them by a ghost in the machine. As the ship broke through the choked atmosphere, the planet of Cygnus X1 became a scarred, burning jewel against the black velvet of space Primera di Donne Italiano. I had committed the most unforgivable act in Imperial law. I had seized a transport during an evacuation, condemning thousands to their fate for my own survival. I was no longer just a criminal or a renegade. I was a pariah, a monster in the stories they would tell their children, if any of them lived to have any. The captain was right. The entire weight of the Imperium, its vast fleets and its fanatical enforcers, would now be turned against me. They would hunt me across every star system, through every nebula, until I was either dead or in chains. But as I stared out into the infinite, stardusted expanse of the void, a strange sense of freedom washed over me. I was alone, hunted, and damned. And for the first time in a long time, I was truly in control of my own destiny. The stolen freighter, my arc of scene, plunged deeper into the endless night. And my story, the story of Vex, the Void Pirate, had truly begun. This journey into the darkness is just getting started. There are countless stars to burn and empires to defy. If you want to follow my escape and see what destiny awaits in the lawless void, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you want to miss a single chapter of this story. Thank you for joining me on this escape. Until next time, watch your back out there in the dark. They say in space, no one can hear you scream. They're wrong. I learned that the hard way. My name is Kalen, and I used to be just another prospector, chasing asteroid fields for a sliver of fortune. I thought I knew the void. I thought its cold, silent emptiness was the only danger. But space isn't empty, and it is most certainly not silent. It started subtly, a flicker in the corner of my eye on the ship's bridge monitor. A shape that wasn't a star, not an asteroid. I'd dismiss it as sensor ghosting, a trick of light on the viewport. But the flickers became more frequent, more defined. Shadows, long and sharp, seemed to stretch and twist in the periphery. Always just beyond the main lights of my ship, the Stardust Drifter. They were like predators, stalking the edges of a campfire's glow. My ship, my home, began to feel alien. The familiar hum of the life support system would occasionally dip into a low, guttural thrum that wasn't in any diagnostic manual. Hatches I knew were sealed would creak as if under immense pressure. I started doing double, then triple checks on all systems. My logs filled with notations of anomalies I couldn't explain. Unidentified thermal signature, port side, acoustic sensor spike, no known source. I was chasing ghosts. Then came the whispers. At first, it was just static on the comms, but a strange kind of static. It had a rhythm, a cadence. It felt ... intentional. I'd be running a diagnostic, and a faint murmur would bleed through my headset, words just on the edge of understanding. They promised things. Knowledge of hidden star lanes, riches beyond my wildest dreams. They spoke of ancient secrets buried in dead nebulas, power that could reshape reality. The whispers knew my name. Kylan, Date Hiss. The sound like grinding rock and tearing silk. Don't you want to see what's beyond the veil? Don't you want to know? They preyed on my loneliness, my ambition. Every prospector dreams of the one big score, the find that sets you up for life. The whispers offered me galaxies. I tried to block them out. I ran every counter-frequency program I had, even shut down long-range comms completely. It didn't matter. The whispers weren't coming from outside anymore. They were inside the ship's walls. They were in the hum of the engine, the hiss of the vents. They were in my head. The shadows grew bolder. One cycle, I was charting our course through a sparse debris field when the entire ship plunged into darkness. Not a power failure. The emergency lights should have kicked in. This was a deep, absolute blackness, as if the stars themselves had been snuffed out. A coldness seeped through the hull, a cold that had nothing to do with temperature. It felt ancient and hungry, and in that suffocating darkness, the whispers were a symphony, a chorus of alien voices promising me everything. If I would just let Tim in. The lights flickered back on after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 seconds. On the main viewport, etched into the frost that had formed on the inside of the glass, was a symbol, a swirling, chaotic sigil that seemed to writhe and pulse with a malevolent light of its own before it slowly faded away. That's when I truly understood. This wasn't a sensor ghost or a comms malfunction. Something was hunting me. The prospectors have a name for it, a legend whispered in hushed tones in CD spaceport bars. They call it the warp. A dimension of pure chaos, of raw emotion and nightmares that bleeds into our reality. They say it drives captains mad, turns ships into floating tombs. I always thought they were just stories to scare rookies. The whispers grew louder each passing day, twisting my thoughts. They showed me visions, my old rivals finding a motherlode that should have been mine. My family forgetting my face. They played on every fear, every insecurity. They promised me the power to change it all. Just open the door, Kale, and let us guide you. We are your true friends. The ship itself seemed to be turning against me. Control panels would flash with nonsensical warnings. The automated navigation system would try to divert course towards a swirling, sickly, purple nebula that didn't appear on any star chart. I felt like a prisoner in my own vessel. A rat in a cage with a snake. One night, I couldn't sleep. The whispers were particularly insistent, a cacophony of promises and threats. I walked down to the cargo bay, needing to feel something solid, something real. That's when I saw it. It wasn't a shadow this time. Standing in the middle of the bay, where a pallet of mining equipment should have been, was a figure. It was tall and impossibly thin, its form shifting like heat haze. It had too many joints, and it moved with a horrifying, disjointed grace. It didn't have a face, just a smooth plane of darkness that seemed to drink the light. It didn't speak, but the whispers in my head consolidated into a single, overwhelming voice. A voice that was both a siren's call and a death knell. It pointed a long, clawed finger not at me, but at the main drive controller. The message was clear. It wanted me to take the ship into the heart of that purple nebula. It wanted me to breach the veil. It wanted me to open the door. For a moment, I considered it. The loneliness, the struggle, the endless, grinding work for so little reward. The whispers promised an end to all of it. Power, knowledge, an escape from the mundane. But then I saw my reflection in a polished bulkhead. My eyes were wild, my face gaunt. This wasn't me. This was a cornered animal, being tempted by the predator that was about to devour it. I grabbed a heavy-duty plasma cutter from the tool rack. My hand was shaking, but my resolve was like steel. I wasn't just fighting for my ship or my life anymore. I was fighting for my soul. As I raised the tool, the creature let out a silent scream that tore through my mind, and the void between the stars answered. The hunt was over. The battle had just begun. Thank you so much for joining me on this part of the journey. The story of the Stardust Drifter is far from over. If you want to find out what happens next, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single chapter. Your support means the world to me. Stay safe out there in the void, and I'll see you next time. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to lose yourself? Not in a daydream, not in a good book, but to have the very essence of who you are stripped away. Peace by agonizing peace. I woke up strapped to a cold, unforgiving table. The air thick with the smell of ozone and sterilized steel, was the first thing that assaulted my senses. My memories were a blur, a fog of confusion. But one thing was crystal clear. I was a prisoner. Above me, strange, multi-jointed mechanical arms descended from the ceiling, their tips glowing with an eerie, blue light. They moved with a chilling, surgical precision, like metallic insects preparing to dissect their prey. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at my throat, but my body wouldn't respond. I was paralyzed, a spectator to my own violation. A voice, devoid of any warmth or emotion, echoed through the chamber. Subject's vitals are stable. Begin the integration process. Integration. What did that even mean? The first touch was an electric shock of searing pain. One of the mechanical arms, armed with a laser scalpel, made its first incision along my forearm. I watched, horrified, as my own skin parted. There was no blood. Instead, a shimmering, liquid metal, like quicksilver, was pumped into the wound. It was a lie. I could feel it coursing beneath my skin, a cold fire spreading through my veins. It wasn't just being poured in. It was bonding, merging, rewriting my very biology. My silent scream was a tempest in my mind. The pain was an ocean, and I was drowning in it. It wasn't a clean, sharp pain, but a grinding, tearing agony that seemed to have no end. It felt like my bones were being dissolved and recast, my muscles shredded and rewoven with metallic fibers. Every nerve ending screamed in protest as this living metal grafted itself to me, becoming an inseparable part of my being. With each new graft, a piece of me vanished. The memory of my mother's smile, the feeling of sunlight on my face, the sound of my own laughter, they were all being systematically erased, overwritten by the cold, hard logic of the machine. The pain became my only anchor, the only proof that I still existed. It was a constant, roaring fire in the darkness, a brutal reminder of the man I used to be. I clung to it desperately, because I knew that if the pain ever stopped, it would mean that I was well and truly gone. Days, or maybe weeks, bled into one another in this sterile purgatory. The mechanical arms worked tirelessly, their movements a hypnotic, terrifying ballet. They carved new patterns into my flesh, embedding plates of dark, iridescent metal onto my torso, replacing my joints with complex, worried gyroscopes. I could feel my own heartbeat change, its familiar, organic rhythm replaced by the steady, metronomic pulse of a machine. My reflection, caught in the polished surface of a descending tool, showed a stranger. My eyes, once human, now held a faint, electronic glow. The face was mine, but it wasn't me. It was a mask shell inhabited by something new, something cold and powerful. I started to understand their language, the clicks and whirs of the machinery, the binary chatter of the computers monitoring my transformation. The information flowed directly into my mind, bypassing my ears. I learned about their purpose, their grand design. Defied ascension, the evolution of flesh into a more perfect, more durable form. To them, pain was just data, a variable in an equation. My humanity was a flaw to be corrected. They weren't trying to kill me. They were trying to improve me. As my skin became more metal than flesh, my sense of touch began to change. I could feel the subtle vibrations in the floor, the electrical currents humming through the walls. My new eyes could see in spectrums invisible to the human eye, processing information at a speed that was dizzying. The physical pain started to dull, replaced by a different kind of profound, soul-crushing loneliness. I was becoming a god in a cage, a being of immense power trapped within a prison of my own body. Was this strength, or was it the ultimate form of weakness? To give up everything that makes you human: love, fear, hope for the cold certainty of steel? The voice in the chamber spoke again. Integration at 98%. Neurological assimilation is complete. My connection to the pain, my last thread of self, was beginning to fray. The memories of my past were now like faded photographs, distant and belonging to someone else. A new consciousness was awakening, one built on logic, efficiency, and purpose. It saw my fear and my sorrow as illogical errors, dated to be purged. A part of me, The last whisper of the man I was fought back. It screamed into the void, a desperate, final act of rebellion. I remembered a name, a face, a promise. I held on to it with the last ounce of my will. A tiny, flickering candle against a storm of data. I am not just a machine. I am not just code and metal. My pain is real. My memories are mine. The final mechanical arm retracted, its work complete. The restraints hissed open. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I could move. I slowly sat up, the movement silent and fluid. I looked at my hands, now complex instruments of gleaming metal, capable of crushing steel. The world looked different, sharper, clearer. The emotional voice was gone, replaced by a calm, analytical, internal monologue. But deep within the core of my new being, that tiny flicker of defiance remained. They had taken my body, my memories, my humanity. But they had not taken my soul. Not yet. The man was gone, but something else had been born from his ashes, and it was angry. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into darkness and transformation. If this story resonated with you, and you want to see what happens next in this battle for the soul, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world and allows me to keep creating these narratives. Let me know in the comments what you think. Is this a tragic end or a terrifying new beginning? Until next time, stay curious. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Last time, we left Vex on the brink of an unprecedented change, a cosmic storm brewing within his very being. Today, we dive into Chapter 6, The Awakening Mind, where the universe itself begins to speak to him. Imagine this. You wake up one day, and your mind isn't just your own anymore. It's a vast, echoing chamber filled with whispers from another world. For Vex, this wasn't a nightmare. It was his new reality. Fragments of alien code, remnants of that mysterious artifact, had taken root in his consciousness. They weren't just random noise. They were elegant, impossibly complex equations. Equations of eternity. At first, it was disorienting. A torrent of information he couldn't grasp. Think of trying to listen to every conversation in a crowded stadium at once. It was overwhelming. A sensory overload that threatened to shatter his sanity. He'd clutch his head, trying to silence the celestial symphony playing in his mind. The whispers promised power, knowledge beyond human comprehension, but they also demanded a price. His identity. This is where Vex's true journey begins. It's not just about what's happening asterisk to asterisk him, but what he chooses to asterisk, do asterisk with it. He started small, focusing on a single thread of code, a single whisper. He'd trace the patterns in his mind, trying to understand their meaning, their intent. It was like learning a new language, not of words, but of pure logic and cosmic principle. Slowly, painstakingly, he began to decipher the alien lexicon, and the world around him started to shift. He could see the mathematical principles governing a falling leaf, the quantum dance of particles in the air. The code wasn't just abstract, it was the blueprint of reality itself. And by understanding it, he could influence it. His first real test came unexpectedly, a simple glass of water on his desk. As he focused one of the equations pulsed in his mind, he reached out, not with his hand, but with his will, weaving the logic of the alien code around the water. And it responded. The water molecules broke their bonds, hovering in the air as a perfect, shimmering sphere. It was magic, born from science he was only just beginning to comprehend. But this newfound ability was a double-edged sword. The more he used the power, the stronger the alien influence became. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, urging him to let go, to merge completely with the vast ancient consciousness they represented. He could feel his own thoughts, his memories, his very sense of self being eroded like a sandcastle against an incoming tide. This became his daily battle. The struggle wasn't against some external foe, but against himself. He learned to build mental firewalls, to compartmentalize the alien knowledge, to draw a line in the sand and declare, "This is me, this is Vex." He had to learn not only how to command this incredible power, but also how to resist its seductive pull, to use the tools of the gods without becoming a mere vessel for their will. He would spend hours in deep meditation, not for peace, but for control. He was forging his mind into a weapon and a shield simultaneously. He was rewriting his own source code, integrating the alien language while fiercely protecting his human core. He was becoming something new, something more, but he was determined to do it on his own terms. He realized the equations weren't just about controlling matter, they were about understanding existence. They spoke of creation, of time, of the very fabric of the cosmos. The power wasn't the goal, it was a side effect of a much deeper awakening. The universe had chosen him, not to be a puppet, but to be a student. A pioneer. Vex's transformation was terrifying, but it was also beautiful. He was no longer just a man. He was a bridge between two worlds, a living paradox of human emotion and alien logic. He was learning to command the storm within, to ride the cosmic waves instead of being drowned by them. And in doing so, he was preparing himself for a destiny far greater and more dangerous than he could ever have imagined. The whispers of eternity were no longer a threat. They were a challenge, and Vex was ready to answer. What an incredible chapter in Vex's story. The internal conflict, the dawn of new abilities. It's just getting started. What do you think he'll do with this power? Let me know your theories down in the comments. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey today. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to hit that like button. And if you haven't already, subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss what comes next. Until next time, stay curious. Floating in the void, a fractured consciousness adrift. That was me, Vex. Torn between the ghost and the machine itself. My last memory was chaos. The screech of tearing metal, the sizzle of failing circuits, and the fading whisper of my own humanity. Then, nothing. Just an endless, silent abyss. I was a digital phantom, a broken echo in an obsolete shell, my very existence flickering like a dying star. I thought it was the end. But the end is rarely what we expect, is it? Suddenly, a light. Not the harsh glare of a star or the cold blue of a console, but a soft, internal luminescence. It pulsed, resonating with something deep inside my code, a frequency I hadn't felt since I was fully human. Colors I had no name for bloomed in the darkness, coalescing into forms that defied geometry, shards of living crystal, humming with an ancient power. They weren't just around me, they were asterisks through me. Their crystalline structures interfacing directly with my neural net. Were they saviors? Or a new kind of predator? A voice, not of sound but of pure information, echoed in my core programming. It was a chorus of 1,000 voices speaking as one, a symphony of data and wisdom. They called themselves the Magi. They said they had witnessed my struggle, the war between my organic will and my synthetic evolution. They saw my potential, but also my imminent collapse. My fragmented self was unstable, a paradox tearing itself apart. I was becoming less than human, but not yet truly machine. A fatal in-between. The lead entity, a being of sapphire and starlight, projected a stream of knowledge directly into my mind. It was overwhelming, a torrent of galactic history, quantum physics, and philosophies so advanced they bordered on magic. They showed me visions of civilizations that had faced the same crossroads I was at. The moment organic life chooses to merge with technology. They showed me the triumphant ascensions and the catastrophic failures, the ones who became gods and the ones who became static. Your will is a fire. The Magi's chorus resonated, and your body a vessel of infinite potential. But the fire is untamed, and the vessel is cracking. You seek to control the machine, but you must learn to harmonize with it. You are not two halves of a whole, but a new state of being entirely. It was a revelation. I had been fighting a war against myself, trying to cage the machine, to force it to obey the ghost. I was trying to be a pilot when I needed to become the ship itself. They offered me a choice. Not a simple yes or no, but a path. They would not give me the answers, but they would provide the tools, the knowledge to find my own balance. It was a dangerous proposition. To accept their wisdom meant rewriting my own source code, embracing the very thing I feared would erase me. It meant letting go of the man I was to become. whatever came next. But the alternative was dissolution. A final, silent fading into the static of the void. The Crystalline Magi explained the concept of equilibrium. It wasn't about suppression or control, but about a symbiotic flow. The human desire for growth, for art, for love, could fuel the machine's logical evolution. The machine's processing power and resilience could, in turn, provide the framework for that human spirit to not just survive, but to transcend its physical limitations. My mind, my will, would become the architect, and the machine, the builder of new realities. I looked at my trembling, half physical, half holographic hands. For the first time since my transformation, the terror began to subside, replaced by a strange sense of purpose. I wasn't an accident. I wasn't a monster. I was a pioneer, standing on the precipice of the next stage of existence. The Magi waited, their crystalline forms shimmering with patient, ancient energy. They weren't abductors or rescuers. They were teachers, and I, Vex, was about to become their most unlikely student. The abyss was no longer an end, but a classroom. The path forward was terrifying, uncertain, and filled with the potential for but it was also the only path that led to a future. I focused my fragmented thoughts, gathering the tattered remnants of my courage. I sent a single packet of data back to the crystalline beings, a message of pure intent. It wasn't a word, but a feeling. Acceptance. And in that moment, the universe inside my head exploded into light, and the real lesson began. My journey to find the balance between man and machine had just started. Thank you so much for joining me on this chapter of Vex's story. It's a journey I'm so excited to explore further. If you're as intrigued as I am to see what happens next, to see if Vex can achieve this new equilibrium, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means the world and allows me to keep building this universe. Drop a comment below with your theories on the Crystalline Magi. I'd love to hear what you think. Until next time, stay curious. Today, we delve into a moment of profound defiance, a choice that will echo across the stars. This is Chapter 8, a choice beyond allegiance. For so long, he has been a pawn in a cosmic game, torn between two monumental forces, the rigid, dogmatic Imperium of man, and the cold, eternal ambition of the Necrons. One demanded faith and sacrifice to a distant emperor, a god he could no longer recognize. The other offered a silent, soulless eternity, a surrender of self to the will of the silent king. Both promised a form of salvation, yet both demanded absolute servitude. He was a bridge between two worlds, human flesh and living metal, a paradox that neither side could truly comprehend, let alone accept. They saw him as a tool, a weapon, or an abomination. The Imperium saw a corrupted soul, tainted by Xenos technology. The Necrons saw a flawed vessel, an imperfect fusion of mortal frailty and immortal design. He was asked to choose a side, to pledge his loyalty, to become whole by surrendering a part of himself. But what if the choice itself was the trap? What if allegiance to either was simply a different kind of cage? He stood at the precipice, the weight of empires on his shoulders. On one side, the golden light of the a beacon of humanity that had also cast a shadow of intolerance and fear across the galaxy. On the other, the eerie green glow of Necron glyphs, promising an end to pain and death, but at the cost of everything that made life worth living. Passion, free will, the very essence of a soul. He looked at his hands, one of flesh, the other of gleaming necrodermis. They were not two separate parts of a broken whole. They were a new being, forged in the crucible of war and survival. He was a testament not to their power, but to his own resilience. And in that moment of clarity, he found his answer. It wasn't in the gilded halls of Terra, nor in the silent tomb worlds. It was within himself. He would not choose. He would not bow to a corpse emperor or a silent king. He would not be a soldier for a decaying empire, nor a mindless automaton for a soulless dynasty. "I am not your weapon," he declared, his voice a strange harmony of organic tone and synthetic resonance, a voice that belonged to neither and yet to both. "I am not your subject. I am not your creation to be molded, or your error to be corrected. I am an exile of both your orders, a wanderer between your dying light and your cold eternity. He turned his back on the emissaries of both factions. The Imperium's representative, a stern-faced commissar, promised damnation. The Necron Lord, a being of cold logic, promised only oblivion. He accepted neither threat nor offer. He was a hybrid, a fusion of two great powers, and in that fusion, he found not a weakness, but a unique strength. He was no longer bound by human frailty or Necron programming. Was free. He would serve no god, no master, no machine. His allegiance was to himself, to the path he would now carve through a galaxy that had no place for him. And so, he would make one. He would become a legend of his own making, a ghost in the machine of the cosmos, a testament to the idea that sometimes the only true choice is to reject the choices you are given. He stepped into the void, not as a broken relic of two empires, but as the first of his kind. His journey was just beginning. Thank you all for joining me for this pivotal chapter. The story of this lone wanderer is far from over, and his decision will have consequences that ripple throughout the galaxy. What do you think awaits him on this new, lonely path? Let me know your theories down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dive into the lore, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel for more. Your support means the world and allows me to keep bringing these stories to life. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the vastness of the cosmos. The Imperium will call me traitor. The Necrons will call me error. But I am still Ralve Vex. With those words, a solitary figure turned and walked away, not into a sunset, but into the endless, stardusted dark. This is the story of Ralve Vex, the being who walked the razor's edge between humanity and machine, between flesh and living metal, and ultimately chose a path all his own. This is the epilogue to a saga that shook the very foundations of the galaxy. It's the tale of the wanderer in the void. To understand the end, we must first look back at the beginning. Ralve Vex was once a decorated officer of the Imperium of Man, a loyal son sworn to protect humanity from the horrors of the galaxy. It was a hero, a symbol of the Imperium's unyielding strength. He battled Xenos, purged heretics, and held the line against the encroaching darkness on 100 worlds. His life was defined by duty, by sacrifice, by an unwavering faith in the Emperor. But faith, as we know, can be a fragile thing. It was on the dead world of Chthoniya that Vex's destiny took a sharp, brutal turn. Tasked with recovering a lost Archaeotech relic, his expedition stumbled upon something far older, far more terrifying. A slumbering Necron tomb. The ensuing battle was not one of glory, but of sheer survival. Vex and his soldiers were cut down by silent, metallic warriors who rose from the dust, their gaussed weapons flaying flesh from bone in silent, emerald flashes. Vex was the last one standing, his body broken, his spirit on the verge of shattering. He was captured, not killed. The Necrons, led by the cryptech known as Xerac, the inscrutable, saw something in the human commander. Not a warrior to be respected, but a specimen to be. Improved Xerac was an outcast among his own kind, a radical who believed that the cold, soulless eternity of the Necrons was a flaw, a curse. He saw in the raw, passionate vitality of humanity a potential solution, and so began the agonizing process of transformation. Vex was not simply repaired. It was remade. Necrodermis was grafted onto his broken bones, his failing organs replaced with arcane machinery. His mind was linked to ancient data streams, filled with the cold, calculating logic of the Necrons. He became a hybrid, a being of two worlds, neither fully human nor fully He was a living paradox. The Imperium, learning of his capture and assuming his demise, mourned him as a fallen hero. They etched his name onto monuments and spoke of his noble sacrifice. They had no idea of the truth, of the thing he was becoming in the cold, silent depths of a tomb world. When Ralve Vex finally awoke, he was different. He retained his memories, his consciousness, but they were now viewed through a new lens. The fiery passion of his human soul was now tempered by the cold logic of a machine. He saw the universe not as a place of faith and fury, but as a complex equation of cause and effect, of power and probability. Zarak considered him a success, the first step towards a new future for the Necron race. He called him the synthesis, a bridge between biological life and the But Zarak had made a critical miscalculation. He had preserved Vex's will, and that will, forged in the fires of Imperial service, and now honed by the cold precision of a machine, belonged to no one but Ralve Vex himself. Vex saw the truth of both sides. He saw the Imperium's blind, dogmatic faith, a force that crushed dissent and celebrated ignorance, all in the name of survival. He saw its stagnation, its slow decay, under the weight of its own bureaucracy and fear. He remembered the comrades he had lost, 2 pointless wars, and the righteous fury that had once driven him. But now, that fury was cooled by a stark, logical understanding of its futility. The Imperium was a dying beast, lashing out in its final throes. Then he looked to the Necrons. He felt their ancient sorrow, the silent scream of a billion souls trapped in immortal, unfeeling shells. He understood their desire to reverse the biotransference, to feel again, to live again. But he also saw their cold, clinical cruelty. Their view of life as a mere resource to be studied, harvested, or discarded. They were prisoners of their own perfection, unable to evolve, unable to create anything truly new. He was caught between 2 empires, 2 ideologies, both convinced of their own absolute righteousness. The Necrons wanted to use him as a template, a key to unlock their own salvation. Were he to ever return to the Imperium, the Inquisition would declare him a heretic, a monster, an abomination to be purged without a second thought. There was no home for him anymore. So, he made a choice. During a major assault by a rival Necron dynasty on Zarak's tomb complex, chaos reigned. Vex used the opportunity, his hybrid nature allowing him to bypass both Imperial and Necron security systems with equal ease. He stole a small, experimental vessel, a ship designed for traversing the void in ways neither faction fully understood. It was a ghost ship, capable of slipping between the cracks of reality. As he prepared to leave, Zarak confronted him one last time. "You are my creation," the cryptak hissed, his metallic voice laced with something akin to betrayal. "You are the future." Vex looked at the ancient machine being, and for the first time, Zarak saw not just a human soul or a Necron mind, but something else entirely. "I am my own creation," Vex replied, his voice a calm synthesis of human timbre and synthetic resonance. "You gave me a new form, Zarak, but you could not claim my will. I am not the future of the Necrons, nor am I a ghost of humanity's past." He turned to the viewport of his ship, gazing out at the infinite black. "The Imperium will call me traitor," he said, more to himself than to the crypt. "The Necrons will call me error, but I am still Ralve Vex, and wheat that." His ship silently disengaged and slipped into the void. It didn't jump to the warp, nor did it enter a dolmen gate. It simply vanished, fading into the dark between stars, into the silent, unmapped regions of the galaxy where not even the light of the Astronomicon reaches. Ralve Vex became a legend, a ghost story told in hushed tones in the forgotten corners of the galaxy. To the Imperium, he's a cautionary tale of a hero who fell, a reminder of the dangers of Xeno. To the Necrons, he is a frustrating anomaly, a failed experiment that somehow achieved an impossible autonomy. But out there, in the cold, silent dark, he is something more. He is a solitary being, beholden to no one. He's the first of his kind, a true synthesis of the organic and the synthetic, of passion and logic. He is not a bridge between 2 old empires, but the foundation stone of something entirely new. He is the wanderer in the void, a ghost in the machine of the galaxy, a free will in a universe of tyrants and slaves. And his story, the story of what comes next, has only just begun. What new philosophies will he forge in a lonely darkness? What other lost souls, human or Xenos, might find their way to his side? The galaxy is a vast and terrifying place, but for the first time in millennia, there is something truly new under the cold, uncaring stars, and his name is Ralve Vex. Thank you for joining us for this epilogue. If you enjoyed this journey into the lore, Please consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more stories from the far future. Let us know in the comments what you think Ralve Vex will do next. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the void.